It took me a long time to realize one thing, and unfortunately, when I realized the truth, it was too late to change anything. So the decision I made then completely changed my life forever. Listen to this story to the very end to find out the consequences of my decision. The first time something felt off, it wasn't some dramatic scene, no late night whisper or lipstick on a collar cliche. It was a towel, a goddamn towel. 2 days after I came home from a client seminar in Charleston, I stepped out of the shower and grabbed what I thought was one of our usual beige linens. But the fibers were coarser, the embroidery different, gold lettering across one corner. Royal Oak Inn. It snagged something in me, sharp and immediate. I froze, dripping, holding it like it might explain itself. Kaylee hadn't traveled recently. She hadn't even left town. When I asked her, keeping my voice casual, she blinked like I'd pointed out a loose thread. "Oh," she said. "That?" "A friend stayed over last week. Probably hers." Her shrug was too light, rehearsed. I should have let it go, let it slide off into the sea of everyday static. But I didn't. A week later, I was reaching for our winter coats on the top shelf of the bedroom closet when my hand brushed a small box tucked behind the suitcase. I pulled it down, opened it, and stared. Two identical bottles of cologne. Same brand, same dark glass. But only one was mine. I took a breath, picked them up. One was nearly empty, the other barely touched. She came into the room right then, humming something, her hair still damp from the shower. "Oh," she said, eyes flicking to the bottles in my hand. "I bought one. Wanted to see if you liked it. I didn't. Thought I'd surprise you." She smiled too quick, too wide. I nodded slowly, set them back down, and something clicked. Not in the scent, but in her tone. In the softness she tried to wear like a second skin. It wasn't that the story was strange. It was that she gave it like a reflex. She had lied. I didn't confront her. Not yet. The air in our house changed after that. Quiet shifts. Less eye contact over morning coffee. Slightly delayed answers to routine questions. And the thing is, you don't notice the slow rot until it touches something sacred. It doesn't kick down the door. It seeps in through the vents. One evening, a fundraiser event pulled us into a manicured ballroom with polished marble floors and too much laughter. Kaylee was radiant in black satin, her hand light on my arm. But then I caught her watching someone across the room. Not scanning, watching. That kind of gaze people save for something forbidden. The speaker on stage was a lawyer, slick but sharp, with a voice like a warm knife. He cracked a joke. People laughed. Kaylee didn't. She just smiled at him, like he was the last warmth on a cold day. I didn't say anything then, but the next afternoon, I made up an excuse about needing a loan and walked into the bank where the lawyer worked. I didn't have an appointment. Didn't care. I waited in line near the teller window, eyes drifting toward the hallway that led to the back offices. And just as I was starting to feel the absurdity of it all, I saw her. Kaylee stepped into view, casual, carrying a box of smoothies like it was a summer picnic. She tapped the glass, handed one to the man inside. He reached out, didn't take the smoothie right away. Instead, he curled his fingers around her wrist, slowly, deliberately. Then he kissed it. Not lips to skin, just a light press, the kind meant to say I could take more if I wanted. I left before she saw me. I drove home in silence, ate her homemade pesto pasta that night, even complimented it, told her it was nice to finally be alone again. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and went to clean up the dishes. I sat there spoon-tapping the plate, realizing the truth wasn't loud. It was in the quiet, in the rehearsed lines, the too clean stories, the way she had stopped asking how I slept at night. I used to wake up next to the woman I loved. Now I woke up next to someone I studied. Later that week, I waited outside the courier's hub in my car, a crisp $50 bill folded in my palm. When the guy who handled deliveries to Kaylee's office stepped out for a cigarette, I walked up and asked a few harmless questions. Some money changed hands. He talked. One of the packages he'd delivered was a small padded envelope, addressed by hand. Inside, he said, was lingerie. Red, delicate, expensive, and a note. He didn't remember the exact words, but he recalled the last line because, according to him, it sounded like something from a movie. I tracked down the package's original sender. Took me 3 calls and some browser tab gymnastics, but I got it. A burner account. The return label led nowhere, but the message was typed on an old-school typewriter. There was only one place in the house we kept anything remotely like that. I walked into the garage that night under the pretense of looking for a wrench. Tucked beneath a blanket behind old holiday lights sat a dusty Remington I hadn't seen in years. I placed our golden retriever next to it, stared at the machine, then at Kaylee when she came to ask what I was doing. "He'll guard it," I said. "It's your truth machine now." She laughed like it was a joke, but my eyes didn't leave hers. And for a second, just one, something flickered behind her lashes. A falter, a pause, like her subconscious missed its cue. I didn't say anything else that night, but I knew. I knew the way a field knows a storm is coming. The sky hadn't cracked open yet, but the pressure had changed. And storms? They don't knock, they tear. It started with a screen name. I built the freelance profile late at night, the laptop humming like a low secret in the dark. The name was forgettable, professional, the bio vague. A boutique consulting firm seeking help managing an overseas campaign. Flexible, well-paid, client confidential. The bait was tailored for her. Kaylee had done freelance work before, social media campaigns, strategy gigs, so I knew the lingo that would draw her in. I offered just enough mystery to spark curiosity, enough money to dissolve hesitation. She messaged back by morning, "Sounds interesting. I'm free Thursday after 6. When the day came, I made sure to be called away to dinner across town. She got dressed like it mattered. New black dress, hair curled, perfume she only wore when she wanted to be unforgettable. I watched from down the block as she stepped into the cafe we'd agreed on. I'd chosen it for the vintage lights and quiet corners, and for the bouquet. Sitting at a table by the window was a vase of blackened roses, dried, crumbling. A small card rested against it. "For honesty, past due." She paused mid-step. I watched her eyes scan the room, watched her realize no one was waiting for her. She turned fast, too fast, one heel snapping on the sidewalk. She didn't stop to pick it up, just ran. I didn't follow. I didn't need to, because her laptop was already open on our kitchen table, connected to the living room TV. Her search history, her messages, her bookings, the curated gallery of her double life, the soundtrack of 1,000 small betrayals, arranged neatly like a slideshow. That night she came home quiet, smudged eyeliner, broken heel in her bag. She didn't say a word when she saw the screen. Her phone slipped from her fingers. The silence between us thickened like fog. I didn't speak. I just watched. The next morning was her birthday. She came down in a robe, face bare, voice cautious. I handed her a box wrapped in silver paper. Inside, 2 first-class tickets to Italy, wine tastings, gondola rides, 5-star hotels, and an envelope labeled "For Us." She opened it slowly. A waiver, legal, airtight. In exchange for the trip, she'd relinquish all claims to the house. She blinked, confused. "Why do I need to sign this?" "To keep things clear," I said and smiled. She signed. At the airport, she wore the same perfume. Sent me a text. "Boarding soon. Wish you were here." I was there, but not to fly. A courier met her at the gate and handed her a small box. She opened it carefully. Inside was a flash drive and a note. The video showed her stepping out of the lawyer's office just last week, twirling her hair, giggling, whispering. That was better than last week. The note beside the drive. Now you have your trip and time to think. I sipped coffee nearby, watching her face fall. She didn't cry. Not then. She sat, frozen, the boarding line moving without her. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was the beginning of silence finally taking shape. A mirror placed gently in her hands. She had the trip, but now she had to sit with it. She was gone for 9 days. I didn't track her flight or watch her social media. There was nothing to gain from the performance. Whatever emotions unraveled in hotel rooms between museums and wine tastings weren't my concern anymore. Italy wasn't a punishment. It was a mirror. And from what I knew of Kaylee, the hardest thing for her was seeing herself without anyone else reflecting back. When she returned, the house was cleaner than she left it, but different. Her favorite paintings were gone from the walls, boxed in the garage. Her framed photos of us together, once arranged perfectly across the mantel, had been replaced with blank white frames, just emptiness behind glass. She looked at them, but didn't ask why. I think she already knew. She cooked that night. Pasta again, of course. Same recipe as before, though she oversalted it. She didn't touch her plate. I ate slowly, pretending to enjoy it, even complimented the texture. She stared at me like she was waiting for a verdict, but all I said was, "I'm thinking about rebranding one of my properties." She blinked, caught off guard. "Oh?" "A restaurant," I said, dabbing the corner of my mouth with a napkin. "It's for sale. Closing bids tomorrow. You know the one. You used to like it." She swallowed. Hard. I saw the exact moment she realized which one I meant. The restaurant we'd gone to every year on our anniversary. The place where she once told me she wanted a second child. Where she laughed so loud once, the manager brought us a bottle of wine. On the house. Her favorite. She hadn't been back in months. I bought it the next day. At the auction, no one even contested my offer. New ownership went through clean. I kept the bones of the place, stripped the rest. New lighting, new staff, new name, second chance. I sent the invitations out under the guise of a wine tasting event. Private, exclusive, invite only. Sent one to Kaylee using a fake sommelier service account. The invitation mentioned a showcase of rare vintages, an intimate setting for select past patrons. Dress code, elegant, evening wear. She showed up in a burgundy gown I hadn't seen before, but I recognized the earrings, gifts from our 5th anniversary. Her heels tapped nervously against the hardwood as she stepped inside. What she didn't expect was the guest list. At the far end of the main room sat a long table. Around it, a curated gathering of her past. A former friend she ghosted after a business deal went south. An old accountant she once swore at and blamed for her financial mistake. A waitress she had screamed at and cost a job. A former colleague she had gossiped about. People she'd wronged when she thought no one was watching. They weren't shouting. They weren't accusing. They were sipping wine. Waiting. She didn't speak. Just stood there, frozen. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, like the words couldn't find a path forward. I stepped out from the back, onto a small stage, adjusted the mic. "Good evening," I said. "Welcome to Second Chance. The name isn't about redemption, it's about memory. Everyone here," I said, gesturing to the room, "has heard a promise, a vow, a version of truth that was never honored." I paused. The silence was so thick, it felt alive. "But tonight," I continued, "everyone here is free." The room erupted in applause. Kaylee turned and bolted, her hands shielding her face like the cameras were imaginary. I didn't follow her. I never planned to. The point wasn't to destroy her in front of strangers. It was to let her face the consequences with people who already knew the story. This wasn't about humiliation. It was about recognition. That night, she didn't come home. I didn't wonder where she went. She needed time to try on a new version of herself. I'd seen the old one unravel, thread by thread. I sat on the restaurant's rooftop alone, sipping one of the vintages no one had touched. The sky above was indifferent and heavy, a storm waiting for the right hour. It didn't rain, not yet, but I could smell it. She came back 3 weeks later, not into the house, but into the rhythm of my life again, softly, deliberately, like a cat circling the edge of a warm porch it once owned. Her texts arrived at dawn, perfectly spaced. "Morning walk cleared my head," or "thought about our trip to Maine today." Each message was wrapped in nostalgia, calculated sweetness, this idea that maybe if she picked the right memory, I'd want her again. But she didn't understand. I'd stopped measuring time in shared moments. Now I measured it in patterns and how easily they could be faked. When I finally agreed to meet her, she showed up dressed like a version of herself I hadn't seen in years. The haircut she had when we first met. No makeup. White shirt, jeans, flats. The costume of innocence. Her voice was low and soft, each word carefully placed like a stepping stone across a pond she hoped I'd meet her in the middle of. She spoke of growth, transformation, said her time away gave her clarity, that she saw now how far she drifted from who she used to be. There was no pleading, no tears, just sincerity measured by the teaspoon, just enough to seem authentic without tipping over into desperation. She told me she'd started journaling again, volunteering, said she was considering therapy, that she missed us. I watched her as she laid down her new image like it was a business card. Then I slid my phone across the table. It played a video. Shaky, vertical, amateur footage posted 2 nights ago on TikTok. The caption read, "Is this guy really flirting this hard in a parking lot?" In the background, Kaylee and the lawyer, her hand in his. Laughter. She leaned into him, hair tossed, head tilted, exactly like she used to do with me on our second date, when everything still felt like it had weight. I didn't look at the screen. I looked at her, her face cracked, not in horror, but disbelief, like she hadn't expected the lie to decay that fast. She opened her mouth, but whatever excuse she was about to draft died before the first consonant. I leaned forward slightly, just enough for her to know this was the only thing I was going to say. "Masks aren't clothes," I said. "They're the first to rot." She didn't answer. She just looked down at the table. Lips parted, eyes glassy. Not crying, but hovering on the edge of it. The kind of silence that happens when someone realizes they don't even recognize the sound of their own story anymore. After she left, I sat there alone for almost an hour. I wasn't angry. I wasn't smug. I felt nothing. And that terrified me more than rage ever could. A week passed. She sent a long email, structured like a therapy worksheet. Apologies, accountability, plans for healing. I didn't reply. She tried calling once. I let it ring. I knew her well enough to sense that this wasn't about missing me. It was about fearing the silence, fearing that she'd lost the one person who made her feel real. But I wasn't playing my part anymore. I rented out the house under a management company. She didn't know I'd moved. She didn't know where I went. That was intentional. Distance wasn't revenge, it was armor. 6 months later, I lived in Idaho, a small town with mountains close enough to smell the snow before it fell. The kids were with me most weekends. They laughed more now. There was room for quiet, for peace. Some nights I stood by the window after they'd gone to bed, coffee in one hand, watching the moon settle over the pine line. I didn't think about what I lost. I thought about how quiet had finally become something I could live inside. But even then, I knew it wasn't over. Because the truth, once exposed, doesn't die. It waits. And I wasn't done letting her meet it. Not yet. Her birthday landed on a Saturday that year. A cold one. Dry skies. Wind that carried just enough chill to remind you winter wasn't done yet. She liked that kind of weather. Always said it made the world feel clean. Maybe she thought the cold could wash things away. But frost doesn't cleanse. It preserves. Locks things in place so you can see them longer. I sent the gift by courier. No return address, no warning. Just a sleek black box tied in red ribbon, delivered at 7:30 sharp to her condo door. A place I hadn't seen, hadn't needed to. I knew she'd moved somewhere more centered, more reflective, as she'd called it once in a message she sent weeks ago and never followed up on. Inside the box was everything she ever claimed to want. First, an envelope, ivory, hand-pressed, sealed with wax. Inside it, printed on heavyweight paper, a confirmation of a 2-week trip to Italy. First-class airfare, private villa in Umbria, wine tastings, cooking classes, sunset boat rides. I had curated it like a museum exhibit. Every detail, every experience, all hers. Beneath the itinerary, a contract. 1 page. Her signature already there from the time she'd signed it months ago. Still binding. A copy of the legal waiver she never realized was real. It detailed her relinquishment of any claim to the house, any future earnings tied to our shared assets, and confirmed the final severance of any financial dependency. And finally, under the last flap of velvet in the box, a flash drive and a small card, handwritten in black ink. Time is the most expensive gift. Here's what you bought with yours. She watched the video alone. I know because I watched the TikTok account she created disappear within minutes of it being posted. She must have seen her own laugh caught on film again. the same one from the parking lot, preserved forever now in someone else's feed, captioned with a laughing emoji and a cynical joke. I didn't post it. I never had to. Strangers do the work of ghosts better than I ever could. The footage on the flash drive went deeper. I'd compiled every subtle cruelty she thought went unnoticed. The recordings of her voice from the hallway camera she once insisted was just for safety. Her conversations with the lawyer, the things she said when she thought I was asleep, the sound of her laugh when she said my name to someone else, like it was a costume she'd already taken off. There was even a clip of her from the night she came home after our staged blind date. She dropped her keys, slumped against the door, muttering to herself, "God, what am I doing?" It was the only honest moment I'd ever caught on camera. She flew to Italy anyway. Pride, maybe. Or the belief that she could still own the stage. Maybe she hoped I'd be at the villa too, waiting in the shadows with a suitcase and a second chance. But I was never going. I didn't need to be there. The trip wasn't about presence, it was about absence. She checked into every location on her itinerary. I watched the timestamps. Always alone. Sometimes posting a sunset photo, sometimes nothing. But on day 4, I noticed something odd. The post stopped. Then the hotel concierge called the number listed on the booking. Mine. Said the guest had requested early checkout. No reason given. 2 days later, she was back in the States. That week, I got a package. Plain box, no return address. Inside, the flash drive snapped in two. A photo of us from 5 years ago, burned around the edges, and the birthday card I'd once written her, an old one, from a drawer she must have kept. She'd crossed out the word always and rewritten underneath it in all caps. You didn't even try. She was wrong. I had tried, harder than most, harder than I should have. But trying doesn't erase erosion, and love doesn't survive on second drafts of the truth. I never responded. She didn't try again. Weeks passed. Then came a voicemail from someone else. A calm voice, professional. Polished in that way therapists are trained to be. Kaylee has asked me to reach out on her behalf, the woman said, to explore the possibility of a conversation in a structured setting. She's expressed a desire to seek closure. We can schedule at your convenience, or not at all. I listened to the message twice. Closure wasn't something I needed. That door didn't exist anymore. What she wanted wasn't peace. It was an audience. So I deleted the message. By then, the restaurant had been sold. My name was off the lease. My presence there, erased. I was already on the move, papers filed, numbers cleared. Life had become lighter with every step. But even then, I knew we hadn't reached the end. Because the final part of someone leaving you isn't silence. It's the echo they send back when they realize you stopped listening. She didn't see it coming. That was the part I needed most. Not the spectacle, not the dramatic collapse, but the genuine confusion. The way her eyes would scan the room and realize slowly that the narrative she'd clung to had already been rewritten by everyone she thought had forgotten, or worse, had forgiven. I bought the restaurant at auction months earlier and kept my name off the paperwork. A holding company, a shell. It had been hers once in spirit, her favorite corner booth, her go-to wine, the place where she'd once raised a glass and said, "This place always makes me feel like I matter." I remembered her saying that. I kept the decor almost the same. Same lighting, same scent of toasted garlic near the bar. Even the same sommelier she'd once flirted with just to see if I noticed. I only changed one thing, the name, Second Chance. Not redemption, not forgiveness, just the bitter edge of irony wrapped in ribbon. She received the invitation in the mail. Thick envelope, no return address, no digital trace. Elegant script, invitation only, wine revival event, private guest list. You've been selected. She replied within 2 hours. Of course she did. She arrived dressed for the version of herself she thought the world still loved. Silver heels, floor-length navy dress, a necklace I gave her before the lies began. Her smile was performative, radiant for no one in particular, waiting to be captured by cameras that weren't there. She stepped into the room. The hostess took her coat. Then Kaylee saw them. One by one, faces from her past turned toward her, like ghosts granted physical form for one final night. Not enemies, not strangers, just the people she stepped on, brushed off, laughed about behind closed doors. Her former best friend, dropped cold after one too many inconvenient truths. The accountant she'd slandered to cover her own overspending. The waitress she'd berated and fired in front of a dining room full of strangers. The contractor she never paid. And more. Faces blurred by time, but suddenly sharp again in the glow of candlelight and polished wine glasses. And at the head of the room, I stepped out. No microphone this time. Just me, my voice, and a room trained to listen. "Welcome," I said. "Tonight is not about confrontation, it's about recognition. This room contains promises you made, stories you rewrote, and people you thought wouldn't remember." No one applauded. They didn't need to. Their presence was applause enough. "You once said," I continued, "that every lie is a little performance. So tonight, the curtain rises." She didn't cry. Not immediately. She looked around, blinking hard, trying to find the angle, the exit. But the only way out was through. A waiter walked past her and whispered just loud enough, "Everyone here heard you. Every one of them." She turned, bolted. Her heels caught on the edge of the carpet. One slipped off. She kicked the other away in frustration and kept moving, barefoot, her dress trailing like a shadow behind her. She didn't look back. Outside, the wind had picked up. It blew against the windows like it had something to say. Inside, silence lingered until someone laughed softly. Not mockery, just the release of a breath held too long. One of the guests raised their glass. "To truth," they said. Others followed. I stayed until the last guest left, watching the wine glasses drain and the echo of her exit settle into the walls. Later that night, she sent a message. One line. "What did I ever do that made you want to destroy me?" I stared at the screen for a while, not out of doubt, out of disappointment, because even now she didn't understand. I hadn't destroyed her. She had. I just handed her the mirror. She returned 1 month later, not to apologize, not to cry, not even to beg. She returned with a pitch. She was calm now, almost rehearsed. Her posture, measured, voice, lower, controlled, soft with conviction. The tone you hear in someone who's practiced in the mirror for days, rewriting their failure into a narrative they can survive. She spoke about growth, about the old Kaylee, like the mess of it all had been molted off, and what stood before me now was clean and new and enlightened. She said she wanted a partnership, not a reconciliation, not love, a partnership, a rebranding of the life she'd shattered, a merger of emotional resources. She spoke of goals, co-parenting, shared futures. She said things like aligned values, fresh starts, better tools. She didn't even notice that I hadn't said a single word, because she didn't come back for me. She came back because the world she built after me was falling apart, brick by brick, and she thought I might still be the scaffolding. She mentioned her career, how doors were closing, how clients had grown distant, how people who once returned her calls now answered with cold indifference. She called it professional turbulence, but I already knew. Reputation doesn't need a trial, it just needs a whisper. She mentioned how her family, those still speaking to her, were concerned about her choices, about her loneliness, about the mess she couldn't quite clean up. She smiled once, as if the memory of us might still melt me. That crooked, confident smile she used to flash before the first lie slipped from her lips. I handed her a phone. No words, just a video. It was taken just 5 days ago, shot by a passerby who didn't even know what he was filming. Kaylee, that same damn lawyer. Again. This time in a parking lot behind a wine bar. Her laughter spilled over the wind, head tilted back, hand on his chest. He leaned in. She leaned closer, their rhythm flawless. She didn't even try to hide it. Not from the world, not from herself. When the video ended, I looked at her. Really looked. Her face had frozen mid-expression, smile halfway gone, eyes stuck between guilt and indignation. She hadn't known. She thought she'd buried it deep enough this time. "You think I'm going to scream?" I said finally, voice even. "You think this is the part where I rage? where I flip a table and confess I still love you, and that's why this hurts? I stepped closer, close enough for her to see how gone I really was. Number, this is the part where you realize you lost a man who watched you die in front of him and decided not to call the ambulance. She tried to speak. Her lips moved. Nothing came out. I turned away and didn't look back. 6 months later, I lived in Idaho. Population barely enough to fill a high school gym. My property stretched to the tree line. I chopped my own wood. I drank coffee on the porch in silence. The kids visited on breaks and we hiked, fished, made terrible pancakes and better memories. The divorce was final. No contest, no letters, no calls. But the ripples followed her. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that the lawyer she clung to had been quietly transferred to another branch, then left the firm altogether. Something about internal complaints. Her business shuttered months after. Nobody slandered her, no public takedown, just one door at a time closing. People like Kaylee don't burn out in explosions. They starve in silence. I didn't stalk her socials, I didn't gloat, I didn't check up, I didn't need to. Because I knew that every night she laid her head down, she wasn't haunted by what she did. She was haunted by what she lost, by what she couldn't buy back with good lighting and perfectly timed apologies. One evening, as snow fell heavy on the treetops and the kids slept upstairs, I sat by the fire and read a letter she'd sent months ago. Unopened, still sealed in its original envelope. I burned it, and not because I needed closure, because she didn't deserve to have her words exist where my peace lived. Kaylee had always said the worst thing in life was being alone. She was wrong. The worst thing in life is being alone with the truth, and she was going to sit in that forever. That's all for now, folks. Thank you for being with me today and listened. And if you liked my story, please subscribe, hit the like button, and comment below what you think about all this and what would you do if you were me. Also, don't forget to check my other stories in description below.